Hello student, welcome to the lecture on conflict and negotiation, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Define the conflict, explain changing view of conflict, explain sources of organizational conflict, explain levels or forms of conflict, define the stages of conflict, explain the outcomes of conflicts, understand the causes of conflict, discuss the conflict management strategies. Now let us know more about the concept of conflict. Conflict is state of unresolved differences within an individual, between individuals, an individual and a group, or two or more groups. Conflict of some kind will occur throughout our career. To turn it into a positive factor, it must be managed in a way that will benefit our organization. Each of the parties involved in the difficulty desires something. Usually, those involved are frustrated because they cannot get something they believe they need or cannot give something they believe they should be able to give. It is also necessary that the two parties be locked into some kind of interdependent relationship where what one does affects the other. The simplest way to reduce conflict is to eliminate the relationship by leaving or by refusing to interact with the other party. A conflict exists when two people wish to carry out acts which are mutually inconsistent. They may both want to do the same thing, such as eat the same apple, or they may want to do different things where the different things are mutually incompatible, such as when they both want to stay together, but one wants to go to the cinema and the other to stay at home. The definition of conflict can be extended from individuals to groups, and more than two parties can be involved in the conflict. Role conflict is generated around an employee's role is very common. Too often, employees are put in a new role and left to sink or swim. Team conflict. Managing conflict in teams can be challenging as a number of people are involved. Again, destructive conflict can be minimized by investing time in the early stages. In the early stages of teamwork, conflict is unavoidable as team members are unsure of their role. When the team becomes established, constructive conflict is healthy once the views of all team members are listened to with respect. Classification of conflict. Conflict can be classified into two general categories, that is, internalized or intrapersonal, and organizational from the standpoint of the context it exists in. Internalized or intrapersonal conflict occurs within an individual and can be further classified as frustration, role conflict, and goal conflict. Frustration seems to stem from blockages in the attainment of goals. Role conflict arises from the conflicting and ambiguous role demands on the individual. Goal conflict is caused by the exclusion of the possibility of attaining one goal with the attainment of another goal. Organizational conflict occurs in organizational settings and embodies institutionalized and emergent conflict. Institutionalized conflict stems directly from the formal organizational and technological processes. Emergent conflict arises informally within the formal system as a consequence of individual and social goals. Internalized or intrapersonal conflict. Let us watch this video to understand about the topic.
Intra with an A personal conflict, a little bit different. This conflict is also known as Intrapsychic Conflict. It occurs within yourself. This conflict can be developed out of your own thoughts, your ideas, your emotions, your values, your feelings, and even your predispositions. Intrapersonal conflict occurs when you internally argue with yourself about something, such as buying a new pair of shoes, but you know you shouldn't spend enough money. That's intrapersonal conflict.
Intrapersonal conflict. Three conflict forms, frustration, role and goal conflict, occur within the individual, influencing his physical and psychological health and adjustment with the environment. Frustration. Frustration occurs when an individual is blocked from attaining a goal because of certain barriers. At the aggression stage in frustration, the individual attempts to injure either the object that is acting as the barrier or the cause of conflict. Role conflict. Role behavior is a highly complex process. It has been defined as the simultaneous occurrence of two or more role sendings such that compliance with one would make more difficult compliance with the other. Herbert identifies 5 types of role conflicts. Intra-sender. This conflict takes place as a consequence of role sendings of a particular individual. Thus, in sending his role expectations, the role sender may demand 2 inconsistent behavioral patterns. Inter-sender. These are caused as a result of inconsistency of the role demands made by one role sender with the expectations of one or more other role senders. Inter-role. It arises on account of inconsistency between behaviors related to separate roles. In this form of conflict, the expectations of a particular role may be inconsistent with the expectations related to the individual's other role. Person role. Person role conflict stems from the inconsistency of role requirements faced by the focal person. Role overload. This conflict is caused from the complexity of any one of the above 4 types of conflict. Thus, in an inter-sender conflict, overload takes place if the roles sent by the 2 or more members are consistent but physically impossible to perform. Goal conflict. Goal conflict arises where the attainment of one goal precludes the possibility of accomplishing another. This type of conflict is classified as approach-approach conflict, approach-avoidance conflict, and avoidance-avoidance conflict. Approach-approach conflict emerges if the individual is required to choose one out of 2 mutually exclusive attractive goals. This type of conflict involves complications in decision making, but once it is taken, cognitive dissonance supports the decision. Approach avoidance conflict involves both positive and negative feelings simultaneously associated with the attractive and repulsive features of the goal. Avoidance conflict involves a choice between 2 mutually exclusive, painful negative goals. It is marked by a tendency to remain unresolved, which leads to mental stress and anxiety. In this type of conflict, the closer the individual gets to the chosen goal, the more its negative features result in a tendency to move towards the other. Organizational conflict. Organizational conflict has an underlying commonality insofar as it stems from the pursuit of what are perceived to be incompatible goals in a way that may benefit one party at the cost of another. Specifically, its arousal depends on how incompatible the goals are, the extent to which required resources are shared, and the amount of interdependence of different tasks. Organizational conflict has been classified in many ways. One of these classifications is institutionalized conflict and emergent conflict. While institutionalized conflict is the direct outcome of formal organization and technological process, emergent conflict stems informally from within the formal organization as a result of incompatible individual and social goals. Sources of organizational conflict. Organizational structure. Conflict tends to take different forms depending upon the organizational structure. For example, if a company uses a matrix structure as it is organizational form, it will have decisional conflict built in because the structure specifies that each manager report to two bosses. Limited resources. Resources such as money, time, and equipment are often scarce. Competition among people or departments for limited resources is a frequent cause for conflict. Task interdependence. Another cause of conflict is task interdependence. That is, when accomplishment of our goal requires reliance on others to perform their tasks. Incompatible goals. Sometimes conflict arises when two parties think that their goals are mutually exclusive. Within an organization, incompatible goals often arise because of the different ways department managers are compensated. Personality differences. Personality differences among co-workers are common. By understanding some fundamental differences among the way people think and act, we can better understand how others see the world. Communication problems. Sometimes conflict arises simply out of a small, unintentional communication problem, such as lost emails or dealing with people who do not return phone calls. Giving feedback is also a case in which the best intentions can quickly escalate into a conflict situation. Levels of conflict or forms of conflict. Conflict can occur at a number of levels of human functioning. Conflict in your head between opposing motives or ideas is shown by your internal dialogue and is at the intrapersonal level. Beyond that, the primary concern here is with social conflict. Interpersonal conflict occurs when two people have incompatible needs, goals, or approaches in their relationship. Communication breakdown is often an important source of interpersonal conflict, and learning communication skills is valuable in preventing and resolving such difficulties. Role conflict involves very real differences in role definitions, expectations, or responsibilities between individuals who are interdependent in a social system. If there are ambiguities in role definitions in an organization or unclear boundaries of responsibilities, then the stage is set for interpersonal friction between the persons involved. Intergroup conflict occurs between collections of people such as ethnic or racial groups, departments or levels of decision making in the same organization, and union and management. Multi-party conflict occurs in societies when different interest groups and organizations have varying priorities over resource management and policy development. These complex conflicts typically involve a combination of economic, value, and power sources. International conflict occurs between states at the global level. Competition for resources certainly plays a part, but value and power conflict are often intertwined and sometimes predominant. Stages of conflict. The conflict process can be seen as comprising 5 stages: potential opposition or incompatibility, cognition and personalization, intentions, behavior, outcome. Stage 1. Potential opposition or incompatibility. The first step in the conflict process is the presence on conditions that create opportunities for conflict to rise. These cause or create opportunities for conflicts to rise. These causes or sources of conflict have been condensed into 3 general categories. Communications. Different words, connotations, jargon, insufficient exchange of information, and noise in communication channel are all antecedent conditions to conflict. Too much communication as well as too little communication can rely foundation for conflict. Structure. The term structure is used in this context to include variables such as size, degree of specialization in the tasks assigned to group members, jurisdictional clarity, members or goals compatibility, leadership styles, reward systems, and the degree of dependence between groups. Personal variables. Certain personality types, for example, individuals who are highly authoritarian and dogmatic, lead to potential conflict. Another reason for conflict is difference in value systems. Stage 2. Cognition and personalization. Conflict must be perceived by the parties to it. Whether or not conflict exists is a perception issue. If no one is aware of a conflict, then it is generally agreed that no conflict exists. Stage 2 is the place in the process where the parties decide what the conflict is about, and emotions play a major role in shaping perception. Stage 3. Intentions. Intentions are decisions to act in a given way. Intentions intervene between people's perception and emotions and their overt behavior. Using two dimensions, cooperativeness, the degree to which one party attempts to satisfy the other party's concerns, and assertiveness, the degree to which one party attempts to satisfy his or her own concerns. 5 conflict handling intentions can be identified. Competing. When one person seeks to satisfy his or her own interests, regardless of the impact on the other parties to the conflict, he is competing. Collaborating. A situation in which the parties to a conflict each desire to satisfy fully the concerns of all the parties. In collaborating, the intention of the parties are to solve the problem by clarifying differences rather than by accommodating various points of view. Avoiding. A person may recognize that a conflict exists and want to withdraw from it or suppress it. Avoiding included trying to just ignore a conflict and avoiding others with whom you disagree. Accommodating. The willingness of one partying a conflict to place the opponent's interest above his or her own. Compromising. A situation in which each party to a conflict is willing to give up something. Stage 4. Behavior. This is a stage where conflict becomes visible. The behavior stage includes the statements, actions, and reactions made by the conflicting parties. These conflict behaviors are usually overt attempts to implement each party's intentions. Stage 5. Outcomes. The action-reaction interplay between the conflicting parties result in consequences. These outcomes may be functional in that the conflict results in an improvement in the group's performance, or dysfunctional in that it hinders group performance. Outcomes of conflicts. One of the most common outcomes of conflict is that it upsets parties in the short run. However, conflict can have both positive and negative outcomes. Positive outcomes include the following: consideration of a broader range of ideas resulting in a better, stronger idea. Surfacing of assumptions that may be inaccurate. Increased participation and creativity. Clarification of individual views that build learning. On the other hand, conflict can be dysfunctional if it is excessive or involves personal attacks or underhanded tactics. Examples of negative outcomes include the following: increased stress and anxiety among individuals, which decreases productivity and satisfaction. Feelings of being defeated and demeaned, which lowers individuals' morale and may increase turnover. A climate of mistrust, which hinders the teamwork and cooperation necessary to get work done. Causes of conflict. These are the main 5 causes of conflict. Differing values can lead to conflicts. When people have differing values, conflicts can result. If one of your personal values in life is that your family comes first, and if your boss's personal value is that work comes first, conflict can be the result when they ask you to stay late at work or to give up a planned family vacation due to project deadlines. Making assumptions can lead to conflicts. If the husband assumes that his wife will have a hot meal waiting for him when he gets home from work. After all, he works so hard at bringing home the bacon. And when that hot meal is not ready, conflict between the husband and wife can result. Differing expectations can lead to conflict. We expect people to know things without us telling them. Having differing expectations of people, such as expecting the single person in the office to work during the Christmas vacation, while those married people with children expect to have the vacation time to spend with their family. Differences in the way you were brought up can result in conflict. The way that you were brought up, your religion, your gender, your race, and your ethnicity can result in conflict with people who are different than you. Knowledge and ability to deal with conflict can result in conflict. If you do not know how to resolve conflict or are unwilling to try to resolve conflict, this in itself can conflict with someone else who has more knowledge and is more willing than you are. Conflict management strategies. Different people use different strategies for managing conflict. When become engaged in a conflict, there are two major concerns have to be taken into account. Achieving your personal goals. You are in conflict because you have a goal that conflicts with another person's goal. Our goal may be of high importance to, or it may be of little importance to our. Keeping a good relationship with the other person. Our goal may need to be able to interact effectively with the other person in the future. The relationship may be very important to, or may be of little importance to you. Given these two concerns, it is possible to identify 5 styles of managing conflict. Conflict negotiation. Negotiations are the key to reaching agreement in a conflict situation. Without the proper training, it can be very difficult to reach a satisfactory agreement with your counterpart in a tense negotiation setting. No matter what the conflict might be, negotiating can be an effective means for both parties to come to an agreeable compromise. One of the most important skills a negotiator will learn in training is formulating a clear objective of what to expect from the process of negotiating. Knowing what the objective is then allows you to consider modifications that could be made to your terms and still allow you to achieve your objective. Process of negotiation. There are 4 steps to negotiating a land claim. Submission of claim. A written statement setting out the claim with supporting historical and other documentation is submitted by the Aboriginal community. Most often, a First Nation submits a statement to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs or to Ontario's Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs. Assessment. The Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs conducts an initial analysis of the land claim documents submitted by the Aboriginal community. Ontario conducts its own historical research to address issues that are relevant to the review of the claim. Negotiation. Once the reviews are completed, the province decides whether to accept the claim for negotiation. Throughout the negotiations, Ontario, the federal government, and the Aboriginal community outline and share with each other the interests that each want to address in resolving the claim and the ways in which this might be done. Settlement and implementation. After the final agreement is ratified by each of the parties, a ceremony is often held to celebrate the settlement of the claim and the signing of the final agreement. Then, the parties begin to implement the agreement and monitor its progress. The settlement usually involves the provision of compensation to the Aboriginal community in the form of lands or money, which may be used for economic development or other initiatives. Summary. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learnt in this lecture. Conflict is a state of unresolved differences within an individual, between individuals, an individual and a group, or two or more groups. Conflict of some kind will occur throughout our career. The simplest way to reduce conflict is to eliminate the relationship by leaving or by refusing to interact with the other party. Interpersonal conflict occurs when two people have incompatible needs, goals, or approaches in their relationship. Role conflict involves very real differences in role definitions, expectations, or responsibilities between individuals who are interdependent in a social system. International conflict occurs between states at the global level. Negotiations are the key to reaching agreements in a conflict situation.